And in our next story, I'm going to tell you why there's the potential for people to choose a different device if they're a Fortnite fan, of which there are many, regardless of whether or not you or I is, Will. We have to admit this is a wildly popular game.
Yes.
And so obviously we got to cover the Android piece as well. Fortnite for Android has also been kicked off the Google Play Store. This happened shortly after we got the news on the iOS front. Now let me tell you why this is different. Android, for those of you that don't know, I'm sure many do, Android, the ability exists on Android to install apps outside of the Play Store. And this has been this way for a while. And this isn't, by the way, exclusive to going and finding an APK somewhere and installing it that way. There are plenty of ways in which this happens, including stores like Samsung's very own store, which ships on their devices, wildly popular, huge footprint. So as it stands right now, it's tougher to make the villain case against Google, even though Google takes the same cut, 30%. At least other app repositories exist in the form of, say, Samsung's App Store. As much as Google might not like it, it exists. And Epic right now is encouraging people, even incentivizing people through discounts to go get the game off the Samsung store.
Right. And how easy would it be for, Epic Games to just upload the APK onto their website?
Well, they have their own installer that you can install their installer.
Yeah.
And go about it that direction as well. And they can find ways to incentivize you to do that. So the reason this is big is that even if it doesn't fit on the Play Store, it doesn't mean it can't fit on Android. Whereas on the iOS side, if it doesn't fit in the App Store, that means it's not going to be on devices at all, outside of you doing a jailbreak, which, as I mentioned, is more complicated, and the vast majority of users aren't going to be interested in doing that. Particularly when it comes to updates and all the rest of it, it can be a bit of a headache for the average customer, for the average Fortnite player.
Yes.
Now, on the Google front, what's interesting, in the documents, there's some details inside of the lawsuit talking about the OnePlus Fortnite collaboration. And what's interesting there is I actually made a video on this when I believe it was 90 FPS, exclusive OnePlus feature, launched on the Fortnite app. And I actually showcased the installer in India, which was live at the time. But apparently, according to the lawsuit, pressure was applied via Google looking to remove that installer from those devices. And as soon as I say Google, it started. You see, it started with the assistant. Was triggered by that. So now they're listening to me. Google's saying, hey, shh, Lou, shh. Easy there. But anyway, this is in the lawsuit. This is public now. You can go read it for yourself. It's public now. And they said, hey, don't do that. Of course, the Play Store, they want their 30%. Who wouldn't? That's what they've been getting. But again, their wall is not as rigid as it is on iOS. So you go and take them to court and you sue them, and that's the case they're going to make. They're going to say, it's no monopoly. Look at the Samsung store. Look at all these other various stores and installers that exist, and look at the fact that we give you the ability, if you want, to install from third-party sources, which is in there on Android. It takes a few clicks, but it's in there on Android. So a couple different things can happen here. You go through this court case without some sort of settlement between Epic and Apple, and the court system could sit there and say, you know what, we agree, this is anti-competitive. We want to open things up. We want you to make it possible, Apple, take your 30%, fine, but we want you to make it possible for people to install from elsewhere. Can you imagine a future in which you have other places to get apps on iOS?
Right.
I mean, it's a pretty wild consideration. And then on the other side, they come to a settlement, in which case they chop that percentage, that fee, to a point at which Epic is happy, and then they apply these similar negotiations or tiered system or something like this to other brands that are upset. Another one is Spotify. Spotify came out and applauded Epic. Spotify said this is exactly what the industry needs, because Spotify's been complaining about it forever. And you could make the argument Spotify is even in a tougher spot than Epic. Spotify is trying to sell you a music product, Will, for a monthly fee. And that monthly fee on your iOS device sends 30% to your direct competitor, who happens to be Apple trying to sell you Apple Music. So they're saying, look, we're investing in the company we're competing against. Now, that happens. We talk all the time about Apple buying screens, displays from Samsung. It can happen. And you could say, hey, they want to play, they got to pay to play. They want to be in the App Store. They want access to billions of customers. Apple gets to set it straight. They get to say what they want. But Spotify's argument is, hey, you, the customer, stop being such a fan of Apple and think of it this way. If we leave the App Store and competition goes down, Apple can raise their prices. Apple can do all sorts of things that could hurt you, the customer. That's at the core of the anti-competitive argument, is that if one particular group gets too powerful, you lose your options. And if you lose your options, historically, you end up paying more. And so that's why the customer opinion matters. And that's why this conversation is way bigger than Fortnite. Now, before any of this plays out in court, I think it's important to note that the average Fortnite player who's affected right now, the average person watching this video, is going to be looking twice at iOS thinking, as much as I might like that next iPhone, this has the potential to give birth to some pretty potentially damaging scenarios for me as an iOS user. If other apps follow suit and are removed or remove themselves from the App Store, the iOS experience changes quite a bit. Now, you might be satisfied with Apple's apps, and that's all you need to use. But these massive third-party titles, if this boycott becomes bigger, you might find yourself looking for a platform that gives you a little bit more control over what you install on it.
That's correct.
Oh, and since you wanted me to go first, if you have anything you'd like to add, now would be the time before we move on from the Fortnite topic.
No, I think you touched on a lot of points. I do agree with the tier system in a way where, you know, if a company is big enough, like Epic, they should maybe get more of a cut.
Apple should get less of a cut.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Because you're talking about like billions of dollars potentially.
Yeah.
And it's the same listing on the App Store that the independent developer with 100 downloads is paying the same fee. Yeah, I mean, look, Apple's playing in the game space now too with Apple Arcade, right? And who knows what their plans are with that?
They can so easily just put the top of Apple, a certain Apple game, like up to the top.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Google gets accused of it all the time with search. Put a Google product. This is at the root of what's happening in Congress. This is it playing out without Congress. I mean, there is a lawsuit, but it's playing out in the court of public opinion. If everybody comes together and says, we could all benefit through a better distribution, if everybody, let's say people actually get on Apple's case with this, and Apple fears for their bottom line if people don't pick up those devices because they're worried about which apps they can put on it or not put on it, there could be enough pressure applied even outside of the lawsuit for them to settle quickly and figure out a working solution. The question is Epic big enough? Is Fortnite big enough to be that spark that gets this conversation rolling and keeps it rolling, or maybe even encourages other developers to do the same?
Right.
It could get interesting fast. Now, like I said, I'm not a player. I don't play this game on mobile, but I know it's an enormous user base. And I think a good way to think about this, if you're not a Fortnite player yourself, is just picture your favorite app. Whatever app you use the most, put it in the place of Fortnite here, and then imagine you couldn't use it anymore and what that might mean to you. And of course, people in China are considering this right now with the potential ban of WeChat. 95% saying they would leave iOS if WeChat gets banned, of course, for completely different reasons. But it really gets you thinking about how your phone is a window into apps.
Yeah. It's just a driver to something that's more important, which are the apps.
Exactly. So without the apps, or at least the apps that you're looking for, well, we're just so used to the idea of them being there and being available. But if this thing becomes bigger, I think we're going to pay a lot more attention to which apps are and aren't there.